We are back in our series on angels in the spirit realm. And so we've looked at the various beings in the spirit realm. We looked at angels. We looked at the angel of the Lord, the seven spirits of God, seraphim, cherubim. And so we're kind of continuing on that topic, looking at other beings in the spirit realm. And so this is actually we've been on this all year, this series, and this is the 13th lesson. So given that it's the 13th one, it's appropriate that we talk about the enemy. So on the 13th lesson, this lesson we'll be looking at the serpent, which is a continuation sort of last week, the seraphim, which is which kind of the culmination of the whole Ezekiel's vision 4 lessons. So it's I'll go over the review, but it's kind of a lot to review. So you have to look at previous studies if you missed some of them. So last week with the seraphim, we looked at Ezekiel's vision and saw that in Ezekiel's vision it talks about the cherubim with the 4 faces, face of a man, a lion, an eagle, and an ox. But then it says also that there was fire darting back and forth like lightning between the cherubims. So some interpretations say between the cherubims, and so those are seen by many as being seraphim. So in addition to cherubim, they were there. So the seraphim, in previous lesson we talked about how Ezekiel's vision described the chariot. And last week was kind of the culmination of the description of the chariot. So the 4 cherubim had their wings interconnected, one facing north, south, east, west, kind of formed a rectangle, which was the perimeter of the chariot. Then they each had wheels associated with them, which were the wheels of the chariot. There was a platform above them, and there was a throne on top of that. And then there were seraphim within them moving, and so that is seen as the chariot on which God, or the being that was the likeness of a man, was riding on. And so the Ophanim were the wheels. We had a lesson on them, and so the Jews see the Ophanim as spiritual beings as well, the wings, the seraphim, the cherubim. And so in the Jewish angelic hierarchy, seraphim, cherubim, and Ophanim are listed as the highest class of angels. So they refer to them as angels, and so those 3 are the highest class of angels. And the seraphim are described as a personification of lightning. So they're thought to be like lightning. Seraph, which is singular for cherubim, it means the burning one. But it also is the same word is used for bronze snake. And so it's used for the black-necked cobra. Is a seraph as well. And so there's cherubims depicted as snakes sometimes in the drawing. So we looked at some drawings of the seraphim back in those days, and so there were snakes with arms and legs sometimes and with wings. And they were Egyptian drawings of it as well as Jewish drawings and iconography in those days. And then we also looked at the story of the Israelites in the wilderness when they were complaining and God sent snakes to bite them. And so the word for snake is seraph. So it's the same word. So it's the black-neck. So he sent the black-neck cobras, but it's the same word, seraph, that he used there. And so God told him to put a bronze snake on the pole, which was seraph again. So he told him to put a seraph on the pole, and then Moses put a bronze snake on the pole. So we see that the word seraph means a bronze snake.
And bronze snake?
Bronze.
Bronze.
Bronze snake.
Yeah, so bronze or copper snake. And so the seraph in Isaiah's vision, so Isaiah said he saw a seraph with 6 wings. These would be snakes with wings. And then we looked at in Luke where Jesus says, just as the snakes, the seraph, were lifted up, in the wilderness, so would the Son of Man be lifted up. So Jesus was comparing himself to the snake, which seemed kind of odd. And so the snake that they put on, so in the story, snakes had bit him. God told Moses to put the bronze snake on the pole, and if they looked at the snake, then they would get healed.
Yeah.
So they would
That's
get
right.
healed.
Yeah.
So even so it wasn't for the people who hadn't been bit yet. It was for people who had been bit and were going to die. And Jesus compared himself to the snake. Then so we looked at the fact that it wasn't necessarily Jesus comparing himself to the snake, but Jesus took on our sin. So when he went on the cross, so our sin was the snake, and he didn't die for those who were without sin. He died for those who had been bitten and were going to die. So those who sinned and were going to die without it. So that was last week's lesson. Any thoughts on that?
It's that weird that I've been reading about all that lately. On Numbers.
Oh, about the
All the
the
snakes.
snakes and the
All that you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's all come together. So now we'll look at the seraphim versus the cherubim. So I guess one last discussion of them. So there are many similarities between seraphim and cherubim. So there are some that think they're the same thing. Both are winged creatures, half human, half animal. Both stand near the throne of God and appear as guardians. They both have wings in the biblical visions. They're often mentioned together in the Jewish texts, like Book of Enoch, which is like also the Catholic Apocrypha, and some of the Ethiopian Bibles have it as well. And some texts say that seraphim, cherubim, and Ophanim guard God's throne. So it's clear from the text of the time that cherubim and seraphim are not the same thing, that they're not the same thing. And in ancient times, the kings had statues of cherubim and seraphim outside of the doorways of their tombs and their palaces, thought to be guardians. And they were also placed outside of other buildings, and like the Sphinx. And we still see some variations of them outside of museums and historical buildings today. So Kekwa last week was saying that she went to the D. Young Museum and was surprised because they had statues of cherubim outside of it. And then of course like the Egyptian Museum downtown or in San Jose. Cherubim originated as Mesopotamian or Babylonian guardians. So the cherubim were what the Mesopotamian or Babylonians considered as guardians of a throne, whereas the seraphim were what the Egyptians considered guardians of the throne. So those originated from there, and Jews kind of picked them up. So they were both guardians of thrones, and so now we've talked about angels, seraphim, cherubim. So now we want to get to the question of what type of being was Satan? So we've talked about angels. We've talked about, was he an angel? Was he a messenger? Was he a cherubim? Was he a seraphim? And so, any thoughts on that?
Was
So
it cherubim, I think, right? Was those are the ones closer to God, to the throne.
Well, so some say the cherubim. So in the book of Revelations, they were around the throne. So they both are mentioned as being around the throne. Seraphim and cherubim are both mentioned as being around the throne.
Yeah, I've heard that he was one of the highest angels, but I don't know where that actually comes from.
Yeah.
I've heard people, but I don't know where. I've never read that
Okay.
in the Bible itself. So
Yeah, we'll look
I
at
don't know,
some of
is
we'll
that
look at
him?
some of that
yeah, okay.
today. Yeah. So it's so we'll look into it. We're gonna dig into that.
Yeah, I have never read to where the fall comes, and where I have never in the Bible, so I don't know if it's there.
There's a couple of references to him falling, but
It
not
doesn't
very
tell you the
many,
whole
and it doesn't
story.
say
Oh.
hardly anything about it.
Yeah. So that's what we'll be looking at today.
All right.
Yes. So he's described with similarities to seraphim. So he's described as lightning in Luke 10:17, and so we know the seraphim personification of lightning. He's described as a snake in Revelations and Genesis, and seraphim are snakes.
Yeah.
But then there's a verse in Ezekiel that says he was the anointed cherub or the guardian cherub, depending on your version.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, in multiple places. So we'll start with Luke chapter 10. I'll read that, verses 17 to 19. So this is after Jesus sent his disciples out, the 72 of them. And so the 72 returned with joy and said, "Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name." He replied, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you." So here we see Satan being compared to lightning, which is a description of seraphim. And in the same verse, he talks about snakes and scorpions, which is related to seraphim. And so I would think more that this verse is talking about, alluding to seraphim and fallen spirits. He's saying, because he's in verse 17 he says, "Even the demons submit to your name," and then he's saying he's given him power over snakes and scorpions. So he's referring to demons. So some people take it and they go out and try to charm snakes, and people have died from that. But he's not referring to that. It's not really okay. You have eternal life, and you can charm snakes. It's like, thanks.
I mean,
all the other animals will mess you up, but the snake.
One of those two is pretty useful, pretty good.
Yeah.
It's like all the other animals, not so
Yeah,
much, but
yeah.
that one I'm picking
Snakes,
out. I'm
yeah.
picking out that one, and you're cool with that one.
Right.
Okay, so let's see. So you have Revelations.
I do.
Chapter 12, verses 3 through 10.
3 through 10.
And I'm gonna actually go 3 through 6.
Okay.
Then I have a couple comments.
Sure. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on its heads. Its tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth, so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. She gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness, to a place prepared for her by God, where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days.
Okay, so the woman here is God's bride, which is Israel.
Yeah.
So it's the Old Testament Israel
Right.
is the woman. And so she gave birth to a child, which is Jesus. So Jesus is the child. And who was the dragon?
Satan.
Herod.
Herod.
Wait.
It's a hair.
Yeah, so the dragon was Satan.
Yeah.
So he's described as a dragon. Okay, you can continue.
And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. Then I heard a loud voice in heaven say, "Now have come the salvation and power and the kingdom of our God, and the authority of his Messiah. For the accuser of our brothers and sisters, who accuses them before our God day and night, has been hurled down."
So that's where Satan was hurled out of heaven. That's one description of it. Michael and his angels fought against Satan and his angels. And Satan's referred to as a dragon, as a serpent, and as the devil. So there was a war. So do we know what the war was about? So it doesn't say here. Oh, go ahead.
Well, from the context here, it's because the dragon could not get at the child who was taken up to heaven.
Mm.
Like, well, okay, I'm gonna go attack it.
Okay.
Maybe that's not what you were thinking, but
Well, that
I'm just
yeah,
looking at
okay.
here.
That
But it's,
yeah,
I was
that,
gonna say,
that makes
it's
sense.
always the male seed. One with the male child. It's always, and even in the Bible, talk about all the male seed, the firstborn male, like in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, it's always the firstborn male child.
Mm.
So you want that to reproduce itself after its kind. I may be wrong, but
So, I'm not getting it, I guess.
okay, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
So it was a firstborn male,
Yeah,
and it reproduces itself.
yeah. You don't want it, to kill the first male. That's what I mean.
Oh, he wanted to kill the first male.
Yeah,
Okay.
I may be wrong, but
Okay.
sorry, Mike.
Well, that's okay. So Satan wanted to kill God's firstborn child.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And also, when the woman fled for 1,200 days, they did like almost 4.5 years.
I'm not sure.
It's 3 years and some change.
Wait, okay.
Math, whatever. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right.
it's almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years. And we see, so Satan took a third of the stars with him. So meaning that he took a third of the angels when he fell. So this could include, so he took a third of the angels. He was a snake or a dragon. So he could have took also a third of the snakes or dragons. 2/3 of them were left. So so he could have also taken a third of whatever he was. So if he was a seraphim or cherubim, he could have took a third of them. But that means 2/3 of them are left. So if he was a snake, he took a third of them, but that still means that 2/3 of the other snakes are still following God. So it doesn't. But let's see. So Satan, they refer to him as the accuser of our brethren. So the word devil means false accuser. The word Satan means the accuser. And so in the Old Testament, the word Satan means the accuser. And some say that it should be just translated the accuser, that it's not a proper noun. It's not a name. It's just the accuser. So he accuses us in the court of God. And we looked at that in the previous lesson. So he's like the prosecutor in the court. So like we saw with Job, in the case of Job, he's trying to bring a case against us. So let's see. So what does a dragon look like?
I guess what we see on the Chinese New Year. But this one is saying that it had a 7. It was an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns.
Yeah.
And 7 crowns on each head, right?
Right.
And
And talk about his tail. No, that's one. Never mind.
He took a third. So let's see. So last week we looked at some depictions of seraphim, and so this is like one of a modern drawing that someone made of a seraphim here.
Oh, okay, wow.
And this is
that's a snake with wings.
yeah. This is kind of one of the I think the Catholic drawing of it.
I've never seen that. Understand.
This is an ancient drawing of a seraphim.
Have
It's vaguely dragony, except for the
many
legs.
body.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's vaguely dragony.
Dragon, half human.
Yeah.
And this is another drawing of a seraphim.
Oh. Now, that's how I was thinking the way it's described in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
A little less vaguely
That's
dragon.
a little
Yeah.
more explicitly dragony.
So if we say a seraphim is a snake
Yeah.
with wings and legs,
Mm-hmm.
you pretty
That's
much get
Kind of
a
dragon. Yeah.
Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on that?
The snake and the dragon. So they have.
Or the
So they have a place in heaven, and so this is Revelation, right? So he's gonna lose his place in heaven. Is that?
well, yeah, that's kind of the question. Is that was this talking about the past or is this talking about the future?
Because this is a vision, right?
Mm-hmm.
John's vision.
So, yeah, that's kind of and so most take this as the past, Satan's fall, but it could be seen as the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
But it's rarely interpreted that way. But it wouldn't be, especially with the time, because this is after a certain seal was broken. So one thought I've heard is that so it talks about, we see description of falling. So we kind of think of a fall, this, and we're going to look at a couple different places, and then there's like in Genesis 6 it talks about the sons of God went to have children with men, and so a lot of people think, okay, this is all one thing, but it's not necessarily. But then the question is does it mean that every spiritual being that ever will fall has already fallen?
That assumes that time actually applies to them, but I don't know.
Well,
but
it
I see
does
what
and it
you're
doesn't.
saying.
They don't live in time,
Yeah,
but it's
it's a
in
little
reference to us. We live in time.
Yeah, it gets weird.
Yeah. So
If you already,
So maybe both.
but if you already fell, how do you fall again?
well, no, not if you already fell. Like, so
Oh.
the ones that fell. But it's like, okay, does that mean that all the rest of them, everybody else can't, none of the rest of them can fall?
Oh, that's okay.
It will never. So, yeah, so that's why it's like, it's not. But most people look at this as the past, but from the context, it doesn't necessarily eliminate the fact that it's.
Well, he says also that that's the ancient serpent called the devil.
Right.
Ancient.
Right,
Right.
ancient serpent. And so in the New Testament, the devil is referred to as being our enemy already. So he's already identified as that in the Jesus days. Okay. All right. So, all right, now we're going to look at Genesis chapter 3, 1 through 15. We're going to look at the snake in the garden. And I'll read that. So Genesis chapter 3. So verse 1 says, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animals, or some say beast, of the field the Lord God has made. He said to the woman, 'Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?'" So I heard someone say that every time you hear references to beast of the field, that you might think that there's some type of relation to the demonic realm, the beast of. But he's more crafty than any other beast of the field, because when it talks about Cain was in the field, Esau was in the field, but just an interesting thing. So verse 2, The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat from the trees of the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." So let's see. So I see that you see this sermon preached a lot of times. Talk about, so there's kind of a, nobody addresses the obvious question: is a snake talking? There's a snake talking.
You said that was verse 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I'm saying nobody ever addresses it.
Oh.
They just gotta.
That wasn't.
They just gotta skip over that. Okay, there's a snake talking, and yeah, it's like, well, wait a minute.
And that wasn't her reaction either. Like, wait, why are you talking?
Right, exactly. She wasn't surprised
Yeah.
that the snake talked. So that means it's apparently not the first time
Yeah.
that the snake talked to her.
Even the donkey talked on
Well, but
Oh,
he was very surprised. He was extremely surprised. So that was unusual.
Justifiably surprised.
That was unusual, but this doesn't appear to be unusual. So there's a talk, and so the donkey talking was like a miracle.
Yeah.
This seems to be normal for her. So that's interesting.
So this was a seraphim.
It could have been, yeah. So it could have been a seraphim.
It was that. So they call it the serpent, but it's a serpent.
Right. So seraphim is a snake with wings.
Yeah.
So could have been a seraphim because they can talk. All right. So who did God tell about not eating the tree? We didn't read that part, but previously. So God told Adam. Right. So God told Adam they couldn't eat from the tree. There's no record of him telling Eve about it.
Oh, Eve wasn't around yet.
Right. Eve wasn't around when he told Adam.
That's the next verse.
Right. When he told Adam to eat from the tree.
Yeah.
So perhaps Adam told the rule to Eve. So Adam could have. So God told Adam that you can't eat from the tree. But yet Eve said, we can't eat from the tree and we can't touch the tree. But God didn't say you can't touch the tree. God just says we can't eat from the tree.
Yeah.
So it's possible that maybe, Adam really didn't want to eat from the tree. So he said, yeah, don't touch that tree. So it could have been embellished a little bit. But so the problem is sometimes when we give rules to children or people, when we embellish them, once they find out that the rule was embellished, then it kind of undermines all the other rules.
Yeah.
If we find out that the rule was embellished, then it undermines the validity of all the other rules. So verse 4 says, you will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman. For God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So what does Satan say will happen to be the benefit of eating the fruit?
Your eyes will be open and you'll be like God.
Right, your eyes will be open,
And no good and evil.
and you'll be like God.
Yeah.
So Eve wanted to be like God. So the problem is that they were already like God. They were created in God's image. More so than the seraphim or the cherubim. God created man and woman in his image, so they could create. So seraphim and cherubim potentially can't create. So man can't create, woman could create, but man and woman can create. They were ruling all the creatures. They were given dominion over the creatures.
Gave authority to Adam to govern all.
Authority gave dominion over all the animals in the garden. So they were already in God's image. But the serpent, tried to convince her that, okay, you need to be more like God. It's not enough.
No, now you will know wicked. You will know evil.
Well, that wasn't the...
No,
she didn't even know what that meant
But-
at the time. You'll know right from wrong, but
Yeah.
she didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
But she knew what you'll be like God meant. Okay, so verse 6. When the woman saw the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, She took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of, so he was with her.
Why was he not saying anything? What's going on here?
Because he asked her at the beginning, though, right?
Not Adam. This is the first time he's mentioned in this story.
He was watching the game and wasn't paying attention.
So that
So,
was the serpent.
so some people say, Eve went over, she got deceived by the
Sharks.
serpent,
Yeah.
and then she went and got Adam, and she
Yeah,
convinced
you really
Adam
go
and
and
tricked
get
him.
him.
It's like, well, he was right there during the whole
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
He was standing there. So then the eyes of both of them were open.
But men from the beginning has always been too distracted, letting the woman take the lead.
That's, yeah, well, not from here. The beginning, yeah, from here. This is where it started. Yeah. And that
How would you
wasn't,
know? Are they always in the back? Let us get it.
Well, God, it's the woman you gave me. It's her, not me.
yeah. And then eyes of both of them were open, and they realized they were naked. So they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. So they put fig leaves on. So it's always interesting because we always talk about Eve ate the apple. So there's no fruit mention. So
No.
it's kind of funny how they mentioned they ate the fruit,
Yeah.
and then they covered themselves with fig leaves. So what kind of fruit was it? Maybe it was an apple. It's like, wait, they ate the fruit, then they covered themselves with fig leaves. Why do we
Wait,
jump to
wasn't it
apple? Why do we jump to apple? It's kind of interesting, but anyway.
There
The
was
mi-
many trees.
There were many trees, but it's like, as the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord, and he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me the fruit from the tree, and I ate it." Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is it you have done?" And then the woman said, "The serpent, he deceived me, and I ate it." So everybody's got to blame somebody. So the serpent deceived Eve. It's clear. So did the serpent deceive Adam? I think in the New Testament it actually even says the serpent, that Adam wasn't deceived.
No.
So,
Yeah, he was. He didn't stand up for himself. He believed what she believed. So they both fell into
well, it doesn't
deception.
say that he believed what she believed, though.
He was right there with her.
He was right there.
Apparently, He was there.
Right.
That's all
The fruit that she
can
ate.
Yeah.
Right.
He
She
told
gave it
her.
He ate it.
He heard the serpent as well.
He heard the serpent and he ate it. So, yeah, that's usually the motive we assume. Although it says in the New Testament he wasn't deceived.
Right.
So then,
Well, not directly, but indirectly,
Does-
right?
Well, does being deceived make any difference? I don't know if it does.
I don't think
Like,
potentially
he
not.
screwed up.
Right.
Either
It
way.
could. It could.
It could.
In this, just in the sense that, so I have heard an explanation which is interesting, that if, which is so follow with me, that potentially Adam knew that Eve ate the fruit, and so that God would destroy her now, and that she was going to be cast out of, she's going to be cast out of the garden, so he wanted to go as well. So he potentially figuring that God wouldn't destroy both of them. And so the thought would be that he did it to save Eve, which is kind of a stretch, but the only reason I bring this up is because it makes sense of the concept that Jesus is the second Adam. Because if we see Adam as a guy who got deceived, and now we're saying, well, Jesus is the second Adam. So that doesn't make sense. Well, we see, okay, Adam was the first man, so Jesus is the second Adam. It's kind of like that. Kind of doesn't really.
I've been hearing that lately. Yeah.
That kind of doesn't really make sense. It's like, why? But if we say, okay, well, Adam sacrificed himself to save Eve, now Jesus is the second Adam. because he sacrificed himself to save us, then
To
that
save the
kind of
church.
then that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm still forming an opinion on that, but it kind of makes sense of that. But in any case, he ate it. They both ate it. So verse 14 says, "So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life." So that implies that he wasn't crawling on his belly before that.
He had wings.
He had wings or legs even. Right. "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." All right. So that's Genesis. So
I think, so now it doesn't have wings, but it's like a dragon, like, snake like a dragon, with because no wings, right? No legs.
right.
And we saw that it was talking about a dragon, which is the ancient serpent.
Right. So now it doesn't have legs, and so it's going to crawl on its belly. So that implies that it had some means of getting around, potentially feet or something before. So which kind of gives validity again to the fact that it was potentially a seraph. And
But how did the serpent know to be deceptive?
I don't know. He's the
That's
accuser.
my point
He's the
of-
deceiver.
Right. Did God not create the serpent in his image as well? It's his
Well, it
sin.
doesn't say that serpent was created in this image,
Well, God creates all things, right?
but not in his image.
No,
Not in his image.
He
Okay.
creates all things, yes.
Okay.
But
but only men
only-
in his image.
yeah, man was created in his image.
Okay.
So we're not completely sure of the nature of the other beings.
Because last week the serpent was, the seraphim was
Mhm.
looked more in a more positive light,
Yes,
and in this way it's becoming a little bit more
right.
on
So
the
one
darker light.
one fell, yeah.
Right.
So apparently they have a choice too. And so it's just like us. We usually look at the humans the Moses, the Abraham, the ones that chose, but there were others.
Oh, sure.
There were others.
Yeah.
The Nebuchadnezzars, but
Everybody in Noah's day.
we
so it's
usually
just
don't.
like
Yeah,
that.
they just don't get books named after them.
Understand.
Yeah. So let's look at the word nakash for snake. So nakash is the Hebrew word for snake. So it's that's what's used there is nakash, and so it can be used. The root can be used as a noun, a verb, or adjective. So the noun form of it is serpent or snake. As a verb, it's deceiver. So nakash, and as an adjective, it's shining one, which is like a quality often described to the spiritual beings. So, and we talked about the definite article, which is like the, so it's like the nakash, which means it's not talking about it's not saying a snake, it was like the snake was there. So it's talking about a specific snake. So potentially in Revelations we read, the serpent, or Satan was referred to as a dragon, the serpent, the deceiver, and he says that he's the accuser of our brethren. So it's kind of like that's the role that he's assigned. He's the deceiver, he's the accuser. So that's why most assume that, okay, well, this was Satan, this was a snake, and he's clearly deceiving. So yes, how did he get, I don't know how he got that quality, but it's a quality that's been described to him. And so, yeah. So who was the snake? So I guess we kind of just answered that, but But so, yeah, as we mentioned, that the snake that he spoke, Eve responded. He's smarter than any of the beasts of the field. Eve wasn't surprised when he spoke, and then Eve wasn't surprised that he was there in the garden. So the Nakash, the snake there, was likely to be a spirit being, not just an ordinary snake. So it's likely to be a spiritual being, which Satan would be one of. And so perhaps a seraphim, can't be sure, but yeah. So, yeah. And so let's see. So let's look at what was some of the punishment that happened because of what happened. So now they had to work. We didn't get that far, but they had to work to get food from the earth. That was one of the punishment. There's hostility between Satan's seed and her seed. So hostility between humans and demons now as a result of that. Adam lost his dominion over the earth to Satan.
Yeah.
So Adam was dominion over the earth, but now, you know, we saw when Jesus was tempted, Satan said, I'll give you all of this. It was like, okay, well, apparently it was his to give. I mean, because he, you know, otherwise, because Jesus would have known if it wasn't his, he wouldn't have just thought, okay, let me try to trick him. So if he's telling Jesus, I'll give it to you, then, you know, he wouldn't be trying to trick Jesus, because Jesus would know who had dominion over it or not. You have to eat dirt. And you have to crawl on his belly. So there's an article in this online magazine, The Inquisitor, which talks about they found a snake that was so there's a snake. It's a magazine, online magazine called Inquisitor, found the oldest snake fossil, and it's officially called the Tetrapophis amplectus. So it's the oldest snake fossil, estimated to be 110 million years old. And it's said to have 4 limbs, including feet and toes. So they found 110 million, and this is kind of what their drawing of what they thought it would look like. So it's a snake with his feet eating it.
Those little bitty things are feet?
Yeah, hands and little bitty hands and feet.
Oh, I see it. The feet. Wow.
So, kind of interesting. Really kind of.
Looks like a lizard.
Yeah, it looks like a lizard. Lizardish. Looks lizardish. Okay. All right. So, any other thoughts on that one? That part?
I think you have good questions. You know,
Yeah. Thanks.
but it's it only there is questions that only God has the answer.
Yeah.
You know, that men cannot answer. We just have to have faith and trust in Him. Just like with a father, you know, tells you not to come late home, not to burn yourself, because they know, right? And we don't know. You go and burn yourself, you're gonna suffer the consequences of that. So I think there is a lot of people that have a lot of questions, but we just have to live by faith.
Yeah. Yeah, we won't always know the reason.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes it's like when you have a kid, you tell them, don't cross the street. So nowadays, you know, you get, don't play in the street. Why? And then the parents say, oh, because a car may come. You know, but when we're growing up, it's like, don't play in the street. Okay.
You don't ask why.
You don't ask why. So sometimes you don't get, you know, now it's like a lot of kids is like, okay, they're not going to obey unless you fully explain it to them.
Right.
But you know,
sometimes you can explain to them because they don't understand.
Right. Sometimes you can't explain to them. Right.
No matter how you want to look for an answer. I had a little niece, and when she asked things, you answer that, and then she goes, but why? But why? Because the little head doesn't comprehend and
Right.
grasp everything, understand. It
Right.
has to do with, you cannot explain something like the 4-year-old, right?
Right.
Maybe 7-year-old, maybe you can explain
Right.
things. But
It-
so that little one, because they love you, they just have to trust that you're being honest and telling them
Right.
whatever.
You don't really want to set up the precedent that if I can't give you a good enough reason, then it's okay for you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why our parents used to say, "Why? Because I said so." It's like the reason is because I said so.
Yeah.
I don't need to give you a long explanation.
Yeah.
And if I can logically explain it to you, then you obey it. If it doesn't make sense, because then that implies if it doesn't make sense to you, then go ahead. You're okay to do it.
There is a lot of things that make sense to us when we're small.
Yeah, and there'll be some stuff that God tells us that may not make sense to us but there's some stuff that we do that happens, and then, later, 10 years, 20 years later,
He'll reveal
then we
something to
see,
you. Yeah.
oh, it's like some stuff our parents told us. Like now we look back and go, oh, okay, that makes sense now. And so it's the same thing with God. Sometimes He'll tell us stuff, and we won't understand it at the time, but then later on,
He'll
we'll
reveal
he'll
something
reveal it
to you.
us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you have Ezekiel 28:11 through 19.
Yes. The word of the Lord came to me, son of man.
Oh, so this is it's talking about the king of Tyre, and so many also believe that it's referring to Satan. Most believe it. Okay.
Son of man, take up a lament concerning the king of Tyre, and say to him, this is what the sovereign Lord says. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom, and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you: carnelian, chrysolite, and emerald, topaz, onyx, jasper, lapis lazuli, turquoise, and beryl. Your settings and mountains were made of gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. You were the anointed as a guardian cherub, for so I ordained you. You were on the holy mount of God. You walk among the fiery stones.
Okay. So we'll pause for a minute there. So we see that. So he's saying you were in Eden. So obviously the king of Tyre wasn't in Eden. So this is so he's writing about the king of Tyre, but then
Referring to the serpent.
right, then he's giving an analogy of the serpent, which would have been understood at that time in this genre. So he's saying you were in Eden, so you were among the stones. Then he names these stones, and so these stones are the same stones that were on the high priest's breastplate. So the stones that represent the tribes of Israel. And here he also says you were the anointed cherub, or the guardian cherub. So this is like where he's referred to as a cherub. So it's okay. So you go on.
You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created, till wickedness was found in you. That was up to 19.
Yeah. So there we see that. So he was blameless. So he was good before. Then at some point, wickedness came in him. So I guess he wasn't always wicked. He was blameless. He was perfect. Well, not perfect, but he was blameless up until some point, and then wickedness was found in him.
Through your widespread trade, you were filled with violence, and you sinned. So I drove you in disgrace from the mountain of God. I expelled you, guardian cherub, from among the fiery stones. Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because your splendor. So I threw you to the earth. I made a spectacle of you before kings. By your name by your many sins and dishonest trade, you have desecrated your sanctuaries. So I made a fire come out from you, and it consumed you, and I reduced you to ashes on the ground, in the sight of all who were watching. All the nations who knew you are appeal at you. You have come a horrible end and will be no more.
Okay, so he was in Eden and on the mountain of God. So Eden is referred to the mountain of God. So we saw previously when we talked about the mountain of God, we saw that, Moses saw God. He was on the mountain. Jesus was transfigured on the mountain. So going up the mountain is a term we spoke of coming into God's presence. So he was thrown out of God's presence. He was thrown out of heaven. So he was among the fiery stones. So it could be another reference to the seraphim. And cast him down to the earth. So why was he expelled?
God found wickedness inside him.
Right, he found wickedness. Then it also says, what else does it say?
He became proud.
Right, he was proud because of his beauty. So he was made so beautiful and so blameless, and so he became proud. He thought he was something. God made him great, and he thought he started getting a big head about it, and he became too proud. Any other thoughts about this passage?
Sad.
Sad? Yeah.
Become to be so perfect
Yeah. It's hard to be perfect.
and still have to remain humble.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard because it's like, you see the celebrities and everybody, when people start telling you you're great, then our basketball players, once you start to think you're great, then people change.
Yeah. It's because it all goes to their head.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't realize. Sometimes they don't realize it. That's not always good to receive good praise.
I think it mostly is hard because you don't want people to judge you as you're crazy. My boss has done a lot for me, and I tell him, I thank him, and I said, God is so good. He has moved your heart to be nice to me.
Yeah.
And he says, I said, yeah, he does. I said, all the honor and glory goes to him because you're good to me because of him.
Is he a Christian?
No,
Oh.
he was. I think he was raised Christian, but it was some of the churches that are too strict. So then people, but he respect. You know what I say.
Well, I
I'm still
mean,
kind.
he'll probably still take it as a compliment.
Yeah.
Well, one day I sent, my boss name is Jeff, so I sent Jeff a message, right? And I said, the Jeff that I was sending him is another boss that I had. And it's a text or email, I can't remember. But I said, God bless you at the end, because the other Jeff, he's Christian.
Oh.
He's a pastor, I think. So then I sent it to him, to my boss. I said, thank God I didn't say anything bad, right? And he was happy. He said, are you going to bless me? I said, yeah, God bless you too, always. But yeah, I see, when I see all these artists, music, sports people, they always go, they want to thank God first, and then the world.
They think
A lot of them, yeah.
they thank God, but they do something totally opposite of what their gift is used for God for.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
So,
still,
it's still
nice.
good.
Yeah.
Some of them do it because it's good for your image to appear humble.
Yeah.
But I mean, some of
No,
them,
they're not
some
always
of them are
humble.
sincere. I mean,
Some are not.
we can't judge. who-
Whatever
No,
the
judge.
cause is that like what's his name says, Paul, whether it's bad or
Oh,
good,
right.
it's
We-
always
whether
working
regardless
for-
of the motive.
they're mentioning God's glory,
Yeah,
right?
regardless of the motive,
Mhm.
it's
Right.
good.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, I wasn't judging. It was just I'm just saying if you're gonna really thank God, thank Him for the talent He give you, but you don't have to sit there and do something that doesn't glorify Him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it would be nice if
they're
they.
nice, but I know their heart. I can see their heart, and I get that. But you know, if they're in a world, in an industry where they're pressured to be a certain image, and I know they're not always happy with that image.
Yeah.
They can't
Yeah, so
be
it's a
happy
catch
with
22 because
Yeah.
when you become, especially like in the music industry,
Yeah.
I mean, there are people, there's a A&R, there's departments
Right. That's it.
that decide what your image will be.
Yeah.
So they decide, you know, okay, you're going to be a bad boy, or you're going to be
Bad
this,
girl.
you know, so this is the type of clothes you wear, this is the type of haircut, this is the type of way you should portray yourself in interviews. It's like that's decided for you.
Yeah.
You know, there's people that's their job is to decide that for you and to you know put you on the shows where you can, or put you, you know, get you the interviews in the places
Right.
where you can.
That's human identity.
Do a
That-
makeover of you.
Yeah, they do a maker, because you notice like the people like when they become,
Famous.
maybe they win on those like The Voice or the America's Got
American
Talent,
Idol. Yeah.
and then you know they start changing. You know they look different, and all of a
Right,
sudden
right.
they lost all this weight, or now they got the hair
Yes.
different, or they got to change their style. It's because the record companies decided, you know, we're gonna invest all this money
You're
in
too
you,
fat, you need to
so
lose
we're gonna
weight.
we're
Yeah,
gonna
yeah,
decide
yeah.
the product that we're, you know, they control your product. They control the song, the type of songs you sing. So a lot of artists, you know, once they get really big, once you become a superstar, then you get more decision.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of the superstars, they get famous and they get superstardom. Then they say, you know, I can make the music I want to make. But some of them, you know, it's like I can make the music I want to make, but nobody wants to hear that type of music.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so it's like they
Individuals
come out with
that
this to
way,
be like,
yeah.
you know, like Outkast or like
Yeah.
it's like now I can make back any music, and it's
And
like
Prince is always
Prince
like
is
that.
like, yeah, nobody really
Yeah,
liked that.
always, yeah.
It's like, yeah, did you hear it do it? No, I didn't. So, yeah, because the radio didn't play it.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I want to play my music now. And it's like,
Yeah.
but some of them is like, you know, now I want to play my type of music, and you know they stay big because it's like that's people resonated with it. But
Well, it happens in the church too. Like
True.
the serpent said, you know, he sat on the mount. You know, he had really high, you know, stature within
Oh, you mean-
God. Yeah,
mm,
and I think it's just a matter of, you know, I wondered how ministers and pastors and priests stay humble, being that people grow to love them so much because of the message and the motivation,
or the gift,
right,
yeah.
that they're providing to the audience. And you know, I feel like an honest minister is able to say, you know, I'm not perfect, you know, and I'm only speaking to you with my gift from God, you know,
Right.
and this has nothing to do with me being idolized or
Yeah.
being put in this category where I'm perfect
Mm-hmm.
and that I'm on my way to heaven because I'm delivering the message, you know, and
Right.
trying to help you all. So it's not just outside with entertainers
Yeah.
or sports
Yeah,
or
that's true.
athletes.
Yeah.
True.
When you get that, even in our regular jobs, there's someone with this, you know, I'm God and I'm perfect because I'm the highest above everyone and
Mhm.
everyone follows suit to me. So it's even that, even in family, right? One of
Yeah.
your siblings is doing better than someone else,
Yeah.
or
Right.
or you're trying to meet the stature of your parents and things like that. And you know, it's hard to say that I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
You know, and people strive for perfection. You know,
Right.
they want to be as flawless as possible, knowing that it's okay to make mistakes.
Right.
You know, but making mistakes and understanding there's repercussions behind your mistake is a little different. You
Yeah.
know, there's those who think, you know, I can make a mistake and God forgive me for my sins. Well,
Yeah.
have you really learned your lesson? You know, and I think the punishment that God has given to the serpent is to bring him down as low as possible
Right.
for him to see how high he was and the respect that God had given him.
Mm.
He brought him down to his lowest point, to where everyone has lost respect for him. He's beneath, he's to the ground. He's at the lowest point.
Mm.
And I think that's really a good way of humbling yourself. Sometimes you got to be striped down in order for you to kind of see what you did have. You know, it's like you said earlier, from what you don't have, you don't know, right? But you want more. But when you have had that, what is it like to not have it at all?
Right.
It's the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you don't appreciate it until you don't have it.
Right.
Or it's like, yeah. So let's see. So the King of Tyre. So most believe that it's talking about Satan. There's some that think, okay, it was literally talking about a king, the king of Tyre, the whole passage, and some say, oh, maybe it was talking about Adam. But
It sounds like he's talking about the serpent.
yeah, it's
Yes.
talking about the
Yeah.
serpent, and and it would be common in this type of literary genre to make allusions to stories that people know of. So you're writing to the king,
Yeah.
but you allude to a story that everyone knows and refer to him as that, which would be the
Well,
fall
he's
of
telling
the fall
the
of
king
Satan.
he's also
Right, he's telling the king he's comparing him to
Yeah.
Satan. So he's using the story of Satan within his comparison. Okay. Let's see. So Eric, you have so now we're going to look at the
Let's see.
Isaiah's passage to the king of Babylon.
Yes.
Isaiah chapter 14, verses 12 to 15.
Yes. Got it.
Okay.
Alrighty. How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth. You who once laid down low the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mount of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to the grave, to the depths of the pit.
Right. So why did he fall here? So he wanted to be above the stars of God,
Yeah.
which the stars are the angels.
He said that I will ascend above the top of the clouds.
Right.
I will make myself
Most
like the
High.
Most High.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So he wanted to be like God.
Yeah.
So again, so he wanted to be like God is why he fell.
Yeah.
He wanted to be the king of the mountain.
I will rise my throne above the stars of God.
Right. So he wanted to take God's position. He wanted to be like God.
Yeah.
So in the King James, so here it says, "How have you fallen from heaven, morning star?" In the King James, they say, "How have you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer?" So Lucifer is the word that means the morning star. So this is the place where the term Lucifer gets applied to Satan. So this is the only place that word is used. And it's used like in the King James and some other translations, but most other versions now just translate it morning star. So whether Lucifer is really a name for Satan is kind of questionable. 'Cause most versions don't even put Lucifer in here anymore. And that's the only reference that was ever in the Bible of it. So the word was Lucifer, but that was the
It's only
I
translated.
think it may have
in
been
King
the
James, right?
Latin word, so from the Septuagint, I guess. But most people now agree that it should be translated Morning Star, not Lucifer, which doesn't really matter, but yeah. So let's see. So any thoughts on that? So let's see. So in conclusion, so both Genesis and Revelations 12 refer to Satan as a snake. Ezekiel refers to him as a fallen cherub. So last week we discussed that the word seraph means a bronze snake, like the ones that Moses had on a pole lifted up in the wilderness. And that seraphim were depicted as snakes with wings. Given that Satan is a being in the spirit realm, it's likely that the reference to a snake is a reference to a seraph. So he was definitely either a cherub or a seraph, not a regular messenger angel. And both of these are guardians of God's throne, cherub or a seraph. So he was an anointed throne guardian prior to his fall. So he was one of the highest positions. But that's probably why he thought, oh, I can take the top position because he was the higher, high up. So the passages in Isaiah and Ezekiel speak to a tyrant king whose pride caused him to fall. Satan fell because he wanted to be like God. He wanted to stand in the place of God. Satan used the same desire to deceive man. He told Eve that she wouldn't surely die if she ate the fruit, but that she would be like God. Therefore, the desire to be like God was the cause of both Satan's fall and man's fall. So both coveted to take God's position on the mountain of God. So Adam was given dominion over the entire earth, and Adam and Eve chose to follow Satan's advice instead of God's, thus giving the power of the world over to Satan. So Jesus has since come and taken the power back from Satan. So John 12, verses 31 and 32 says, "Now is the time for judgment of this world. Now the prince of the world will be driven out. And I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself." He said this to show the kind of death he was going to die. So he said this, saying, "I'm going to die on the cross." So John 12, 31 and 32. And so when Jesus died on the cross, he was saying that by his death, he was taking dominion back from Satan. So Jesus took dominion of the world back from Satan. Yeah. So that's why he has dominion over the demons and dominion. So he died to take dominion back over the world and also to give us eternal life. So the question is, are there areas in our lives where we've chosen to follow Satan's advice instead of God's?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Are there areas, it's hypothetical, I'm not hypothetical, rhetorical. Are there areas where we have made ourselves God by deciding to do things our way instead of God's way? Are we in rebellion against God today? So Eve decided in her heart that maybe God had lied and that God was withholding something good from her. So she thought, well, maybe, these God rules I'm missing out on something. And so the question is, do we sometimes lean on our own ability or own understanding, so instead of trusting God? So do we reason, well, maybe it's not as bad. God says don't do this, but we can justify it somehow, but as long as I'm not hurting anybody, or as long as this, or as long as that. It's like, do we accept God's rules as truth and the best way to live? Or do we rely on our limited view of the truth and depend on that instead? So the creation account shows us the terrible result of disbelieving God and rejecting his rules. So once we identify the areas in our lives where we are not been living in alignment with God's rules, then we want to ask the Holy Spirit to change our attitude and change our beliefs so that we come into alignment with God's rules. And that's the lesson. Because walking away, let's seek the truth and let's be the light. Right. And so, any other thoughts on that passage?
Oh, I have a lot of thoughts, but I just wonder when God, brought Adam and Eve, why they were so clueless, and why, did they not know that they were born in His image? It's like they had to learn with trial and error, right? And then there's this serpent who just come, and I feel like they're not infants, right? They're man and woman. Till to me, in my eyes, they're adult-sized people that God has produced, but they had no message. But in a way, how did they know they were being deceived? You know, they had already hid, and they had already known they've done something wrong.
How did they know, or how did they know they were
Like, how
deceived?
can they can even come up with that? Like, you know, the serpent comes and says, "Didn't God tell you this?" You know, he said you couldn't do this, and then in their head, it seems to me like, well, you knew better, you know, but you believe this, and so I guess they must have been pure. But to me, it just comes across as them as being completely clueless about their purpose of life. It's like they were just brought here, and maybe the only person that they spoke to was God, but did God not give them the message that they were
They were
born
in his image. Right.
You know.
Well, but it's the same as us, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we're in his image and we get deceived. We
And
get
we
deceived
think we're
often.
smart and we think we're God.
Right. Understood.
And we want to be like, I mean, we don't know exactly all the complete circumstances around it, or how long they went, how long this took.
So I
Probably
guess we God is God, right? And we were created in His image, but we are His creation, right? And I think as mankind, we're selfish and we're greedy and and somebody tell you not to do something and you're gonna go do it.
Right. Or you kind of you let someone else,
Ego, pride, who knows?
ego, pride, either you want to attain for higher, and you say, okay, maybe this is a shortcut, or this is a method, or yeah, you just want something more. You want to, and so you convince. So you let someone else convince you that you're unhappy, that you're uncontent in your current situation. So,
And it's like God put them in the garden. They have everything. They have all the animals. You have everything, just like here in America, right? You have everything. And you can never get enough. Now you want a Ferrari, you want this, you want that.
Yeah.
You want a bigger home, you want... It's never enough because you don't know what is not to have.
right.
You know?
Even if you know, it's like then you forget, because it's quickly you become accustomed to what you have. You become accustomed to what you have, and you feel like you deserve more.
But was this the first sin that was done by man, Adam and Eve?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So it's like they didn't get the message before of what sin is, right?
Right. Well, they
Right.
didn't.
They
Yeah.
didn't
See, now
listen.
we know sin. We're born in sin. It's
It's
who we
in
are.
us.
But
In
them,
it's in our DNA.
right?
Yeah.
They had to learn by trial and error. There's there's this serpent who's walking and talking, and it's
Right.
like I feel like, well, why did God allow that? Is that the way of God's teaching is to kind of get you to experience, to know
Well, I think
who you are?
it's that, and then also that God always gives us a choice
He has given
to
us free
choose
will.
him,
Yeah.
to choose him or not to choose him. So God wanted to. If you know, he could have made a robot, or got a puppy that always loves him, But it's like if you have a child and the child chooses to love you, it's more satisfying. So he gives us the choice to choose him, but then that means we also have the choice not to choose him. So he always gives us that choice. And sometimes we choose him, sometimes we don't. And so that's kind of, how he chose to have the world. It's like we always get a choice. We can choose him. And then we always have options that will sway us away from choosing him.
Well, he told them not to eat of that tree, not to touch it.
Yeah. So we know it's like it's clear the choice, which choice is what he wants and which choice isn't. But then it's up to us to choose. And